a countdown? I always forget. How do you start it nowadays? It's fine.
Start.
It's basically
just
it,
start
right?
whatever.
Okay.
We're already starting.
Yeah, we've already started. Okay, so hey everyone, we're back with the Wano Report, episode number 26. And actually, this is a very special episode. They're all actually very special episodes, but this one's also special. It's special in a different way. This one's actually a cross podcast.
Oh no,
crosscast, I guess, with the Red Force
one
podcast.
One half of the Red Force podcast. Right?
One half of the Red Force podcast. The better half.
One
better half.
entire,
Oh shit.
The better
one
half.
entire Wano Report.
Eric didn't show up, and it's the entire Wano Report.
That's right.
Some say that we ripped off the Red Force podcast.
Yeah, some say.
The Red Force
Some say
podcast
that.
says that we ripped off the
No.
Here, two people say that.
This is what it is. Right?
Eric
This is
and
what it
Christian
is.
accused me of that, like, both times that I went on the
Yeah.
Red Force podcast.
No.
Oh,
this-
same.
Yeah.
This
But-
is what it is. This is what happened, right? We had Morj on the podcast, right? And then once the podcast was over, he started asking suspicious questions about how to do a podcast and
Oh, did you do
how easy it
No,
was.
okay, Ohara can vouch for this. It was Ohara's idea to do a podcast. I was
true. That
asking
is
honest,
actually true.
sincere questions to the Red Force podcast.
Well, all I can say is you can thank the Red Force podcast for the Wano Report's existence at all.
I-
All right, so you can
That's-
thank us.
I'm not sure. Is that
You
a
can
thing?
thank us.
So maybe to like I don't know if we ever talked about this, but like the way we started the podcast was actually I was like, well, when I came up with the idea, I was listening to like a lot of podcasts. Like I was listening to a lot of like Joe Rogan and like other podcasts regarding like a bunch of topics, and I just thought podcasts like this is such a cool format to get like information out in like a natural way. I enjoy listening to it. I like to have like this conversational thing. Basically, when both of us, like Morj and me, were like doing just a bunch of videos. Like, I mean, like the high quality videos obviously are fun to make, but they're also hard to make. So I feel like the podcast was like a cool chance to
Well,
get
let's be honest,
our
right?
ideas out.
Let's be honest, right? Podcasts, super easy, low effort, a lot of content. All right, that's what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's also like a chill format just to socialize, right? Like
Yeah,
with
sure.
with other creators, with people, and so yeah. And I honestly, I genuinely, honestly, I had that idea, and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, you guys like asked me like, oh, you guys want to come on my podcast? I'm like, oh shit, there's already a podcast. And then a little bit later, I found out that there's like the One Piece podcast.
Yeah,
I
there's
also
a
was
few
not
out
aware
there.
of that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever
So-
be invited on that. Okay, the point
No.
being, guys, go subscribe
Why not,
to the Red
Morj?
Force podcast. They
Well, like, you're
have
really
done the
close to-
podcast game longer than us and in a much more organized fashion with better guests overall.
Better guess.
No, better guess.
We have the same
Especially
guests.
when we
have
are
the same-
on.
We have the same friends. We have the same guests. Like, we haven't had anyone out of the community, so
They're better guests than our guests.
okay.
You
No, but,
will
like,
find that
definitely-
all of our guests, if you've liked any of our guests, have also been on the Red Force podcast.
But I mean, it's definitely like no lie, like you guys definitely put a crazy lot of effort in that. Like I know that you, like the amount of work you put in your show is definitely way. Yeah, I really appreciate that, and you can tell.
For those who don't know the show, like we have multiple segments of like different things we talk about. You know, classic How Strong Is Shank segment every week.
It's
The classic. We turned the power scale into something different now, so we've got like a 1v1 matchup discussion.
Oh wait,
and then
really?
we got
You got rid of the ranking?
Yeah, because we ran out of like characters to put on the list, like interesting
there's-
characters. So
Oh, I
like,
guess,
we
yeah.
changed it to a 1v1 battle with using that list to like gauge it. So we've turned that into that. So then, you know, we do questions, we do a whole bunch of stuff. You know, topic of the show, like topics outside of the chapter itself. You know, things we want to talk about in the community, that kind of thing.
And they do really great thumbnails. They stopped
They really
doing
like Shanks.
animated wars, but I like that. Guys, let's talk
Yeah.
about the chapter.
Let us do talk about the chapter, and
I
actually
guess
maybe
the
let's also talk
flashback
about the
in general.
flashback as a
Oh,
whole,
yeah.
maybe a bit.
Yeah, I guess the flashback's over, right? The narrator said as much.
That's a good question. Like I've like seen really split opinions on that.
Well,
Whether the flashback's over.
the narrator's like, let's go back to the main character. I'm like, all right, I guess it's over. Like,
It feels like
It's-
it's over. It
It
feels
was
to
like
me.
I feel like I don't remember the exact like phrasing they used, but it was something like now we turn our eyes back to the present, which is like okay, this could mean we're immediately going back, or this could be we're slowly like moving back towards the present timeline. I personally would like to see like at least somewhere like I was excited to see more of Toki and like her time traveling stuff. I'm definitely sure we're gonna get that, but like I'm not like I'm curious if we'll get a glimpse of that in the next chapter.
My opinion on Toki is she's too important to the Void Century, so we get her at the end of the arc with the Void Century reveal. That's basically what
I could agree with that. Like, I think this last segment of the castle, like them going to the castle and then being sent forward to time, there's definitely got to be some sort of mysteries around that section, basically. So I think you're right that we're probably like, this was the story of Odin, and we covered the story of Odin. So then now that last juicy bit's probably going to come after another reveal in the main story.
Right. Yeah. Let's just maybe start with your impression, Chris. First, what was your general take? We know you're you were at parts very critical of the flashback, so.
Last two chapters I've been less critical. I've enjoyed these last two chapters a little bit more. The two chapters before this, I wasn't too happy, and I know Morj wasn't that excited about it either. You know, it's a bit of, this flashback's a bit of hit and miss for me, because there's been really great stuff, and then there's been really like weird pacing issues and that kind of thing. I'm sure you've talked about this with Dritz when he was on the channel. I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But yeah, the chapter overall, it's kind of weird to me, because I get that like this chapter's supposed to be the big emotional payoff for this flashback. You know, Odin being epic, him dying with a smile on his face, him saying he's, I was born to boil, that kind of stuff. But like, at the end of the day, I didn't really feel connected with Odin, so the emotional impact wasn't really there. Like, contrast that with Corazon and his death. I think that was much more an impactful death, even though Corazon's a much less important character compared to Odin, like in the grand scheme. So, like, the emotional impact of this chapter is not really there for me. But again, it's all there. Like, that's the thing with this flashback. All the little things, all the dot points are there to make it, an emotional story. But I'm not sure that the sort of the way it's been structured and the way it's been shown has really helped the emotional weight of this story. Yeah, it's been an okay flashback in my opinion. I mean, by the Roger Whitebit stuff, everyone loves that hype, right? We can't ignore that. The Kaido stuff with him killing the granny, because she intervened in the fight, kind of confirms a few things in my mind, that Kaido actually does respect strength, and that he feels like his fight was cheated, and like, it kind of also implies that, because some people out there were saying that Kaido planned the whole Momonosuke trick thing, right? He planned that, and that was his strategy to beat Odin. And it turns out this chapter that it basically confirms that it wasn't. So it helps a bit. It helps to fix a few issues with Kaido's character a few weeks ago with the trickery and the way it made him look, which we, I'm sure you guys talked about that chapter with, the way that Odin / made Kaido look. It made him look a little, little weak. Not necessarily the main villain of this arc. When you compare that to, like, let's just say Big Mom, you compare that with her flashback and she's just destroying everyone. Like, there's no challenge for Big Mom. And then when we get Kaido, this Odin, you could say whatever you want about Odin. Is he as important as an emperor? It's kind of that issue. Yeah, I don't know, it was 20 years ago, but it still hurts his perception in the community, which is, from a writing standpoint, a little bit weird that you would have your villain get defeated in a flashback, even though you can justify it with it's 20 years ago. Obviously, he was weaker, but in the perception area, it makes him look a little weak, in my mind. But this chapter kind of cleared it up a little bit for me. Yeah. So
right. Yeah, I definitely like to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I was actually curious to hear your thoughts on that, Morj, also, because I know like we disagreed on that a little bit over the last couple of chapters, because you kind of like went with Christian on that, where you were like, okay, this definitely left some sort of dent on your image of Kaido. Well, I personally really I really enjoyed the direction the flashback took with Kaido in the last couple of chapters. So like, did that change for you in the last chapter, or is that something?
It softened it for me. Yeah, okay, so it softened it for me in that I will like it if, and Christian, I don't really count this as Kaido's flashback. I feel like we will get a Kaido flashback.
He's in the flashback,
Yeah, he's in the flashback. this last chapter, the exchange between Odin and Kaido that, like, as Christian said, confirmed kind of that Kaido did not intend to win the fight that way, and everything like that. So to me, and it was Odin's last line to him, which was something along the lines of like, get stronger. So I would really like, and keeping in mind that that's the only slash on Kaido, I would really like it now if when we get a little more insight into Kaido, we learn, and it was a few things. Like, it was the fact that Kaido commented on Odin's death, and he actually seemed to really almost be envious that Odin has gotten such a memorable death, basically. So again, I would really like it.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you heard my theory on this, Morj? About Kaido? I think I've told you, like, Kaido's, like, true dream.
What's his true dream?
It's to, like, have a death that's more impactful than Roger's death. That's what
I think dude, that would be actually really... I mean, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, Kaido seems to want an impactful death or whatever, but if it's specifically something like a grander death than Gold Roger, then that would be a really cool dream. So, I mean, going back to basically what I was saying, it has softened it a little bit for me if this is more so the dawn of, like, a new progression for Kaido's character, and, like, he becomes the Kaido that we see today, who seems to be this strongest in a 1v1, looking for some grand death and everything like that. So if I can kind of separate the Kaido from back then from the Kaido of today, and, like, Oda fills in a little bit, like, I still want a little more story of, like, how Kaido became who he is today, basically. And if Oda uses that as a transition point, that Odin actually pushed him in some sense or something like that, then I would actually really like it, because I can separate in my mind Kaido of today is a different beast than Kaido of back then. But if Oda doesn't really go that route as much, then I would still not be as happy with, I mean, to me, it's just always been, like, a very, very satisfying thing that One Piece does. It's one of my favorite things that One Piece does, which is only Luffy can take the big bad at the end of the day. Like, only Luffy could have hit NL. Crocodile, like, the amount of anticipation towards when Luffy finally hit Crocodile for the first time, it was great, and I think Oda does it better than, like, any other. Like, he just builds up these villains that makes it so satisfying that Luffy is finally the person to step up and hit him. So, I don't know, like, it could flesh out Kaido's character more, but it still takes away from it a little bit in that sense for me. That was a long answer, but yeah.
I've got a question for you, Morj. We all know that Luffy is going to get the final blow on Kaido, and that's what, you know, you don't have to be a genius to work that out.
Yes. Zoro fans.
Zoro fans, well, you know, whatever. We already had the wanted moment in Punk Hazard. We already did it. We already did. Huh? We already did a wanted reference in Punk Hazard, right? It's not happening again in Wano. Right? We already did it. You know, when Zoro cuts.
I think Zoro gets a cut on Kaido personally.
Sure, he gets a cut, sure, but you know, but like how like we all can predict the reaction to when Luffy actually defeats Kaido, and you know the power scaling people are gonna go nuts. People who hate Luffy will be like, "Why does Luffy always get to shine?" But my question to you is like, how can Oda really make it so it's like Luffy? It feels earned that Luffy gets his win.
I mean, I've talked to you about this before, and we still disagree. So, like, if it's just gonna go down this rabbit hole again, then I don't know the point. But, like, I think that we're about to hit the halfway point of Wano, and that there is a solid amount of time left after this, because I don't think they win at the Fire Festival still. So, I don't think that there's a way that Oda could realistically power Luffy up by the time of tonight, I guess. But over, like, if it's a more extended storyline, and this was the first phase of Luffy's growth, and he needs another phase of growth, which I would hope it is personally, then I think, like, you know, there's a world of possibilities. Ohara, you got a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've previously already said that I agree with you on that point. I definitely would, or at least I would enjoy it if there was a bit more to the story than just, like, one battle and then it's kind of over, like this one climactic battle and that it's been Wano. I would prefer it if that's, like, a bit more split up into, like, two phases. Regarding Kaido in general, like, I've talked about this before. For me personally, like, the last chapter already, like, still confirmed that a little bit more. I feel Oda has, like, similar with Big Mom, how he painted Big Mom to be this, like, monster who eats her own people and stuff, and then she turned out to be someone else. I think he did the same with Kaido, where Kaido was portrayed as this, like, undefeatable beast that, like, just is yearning, like, because he's so strong, he's just yearning for his own death, kind of. And I feel like the last 3 or 4 chapters have really turned that image around, where I feel we're getting a lot more characterization for him. He definitely does not seem to be, like, this brute like ogre kind of character that's just like clubbing everyone down.
Not
and
as
just
of
wants
last
a good
chapter.
brawl.
Not as of last.
Yeah.
And I agree. I like that.
Yeah, he definitely look like he appears to be someone who's actually thinking about stuff. Like he's not dumb. Like he's not just like this like literally this natural disaster roaming around. So I really like that about him. I didn't have such a big problem with him being cut by Odin. Firstly, because we already know that Kaido was taken down before, and and that he would be cut by Odin. And secondly, because I feel like Oda really made it a point to pointing out that Kaido would get stronger. Like firstly by having, I think is it Sengoku or Garp stating that both Big Mom and Kaido got stronger.
But they were talking
secondly,
about that
Odin,
from like to be fair, he was talking about from when they were Rocks pirates. So like to me that's still too ambiguous. Like maybe Kaido's not in his prime. Like it's hard to say when did he hit
that's a fair
his prime.
point. But then, like the second thing is like in this chapter, Odin literally says get stronger.
That's what made it easier to swallow for me because one, it suggests Kaido wasn't at his prime, and two, it gives him more character development because it's like, oh, it seems like he was actually pushed to become a stronger.
For sure. And I feel at this point, I feel that Orochi might play maybe even a bigger role in the arc in general as we initially thought, because it appeared that like, oh, Orochi might just be like Kaido's puppet who he just like sat on the throne and he's just like, you know, enjoying life and shit and just doing what he wants to while he's actually not in power. But like after the flashback and especially after the last couple of chapters, it really feels like there's like a mutual relationship between Orochi and Kaido, where Orochi definitely is calling his own shots, like overruling Kaido basically in his decision basically to let the like scabbards go once they actually manage to survive, or like sending his own people in there. So I like this, and like Orochi for me is such a, like the turnaround Oda did with his character is so fascinating to me. Like going basically from this character we thought was just this whiny, kind of nobody, weird villain to like this guy who's just like pure rage and has like so much negativity in him. So I feel Kaido maybe being a villain with this enormous amount of strength, but at the same time being someone who like you said, Chris, like respects Odin, respects strength, and is like a bit more honorable in a way. I feel like having those two in combination will make at least I expect it to make a really interesting combination of villains for this arc.
We've seen with Kaido before where he's, you know, when Jack invaded Zou, he's willing to use gas weapons, chemical warfare. He's not shy about using, you know, taboo weapons to get the job done. So, like, that's where it's always been weird for me, because it's kind of been this dual characterization between like what Kaido says and what he lets his armies do. So he's got Caesar Clan making weapons for him, making these gas weapons, smile fruits, sort of the cheap way out to a victory. And then he goes and talks about strength, which is, it's kind of been like a counter sort of, where's this character gonna end up to me?
Yeah.
Or it's always been
think,
like that from the start. But, yeah.
Do you think that I mean, hopefully we get more Kaido insight, because like as you said, like he has this moment with Odin, but then at the same time he did go along with that 5-year scheme to trick Odin and everything like that. So it's like he's obviously not like down the line straight honorable villain, otherwise he wouldn't do like most of the shit he does. But at the same time, like as like you said, he does seem to be impressed by certain things.
I feel what surprised me about both of them is that the flashback kind of seemed to imply that neither Orochi nor Kaido are actually interested in Wano itself. Like Orochi is just interested in like getting his revenge on the people of Wano and basically living a chill life, while Kaido also like he also like he doesn't really care what happens to the people. He doesn't really care what Orochi does with the country. Like there's like he wants to have Wano as a base that's like cut off from the world government, obviously, and like for the factories that are there, probably also like some unique resources that are there, like the drunken iron ore and stuff like that. But like both are really, there is like neither of the two really is like, oh, I want, like Wano is important to me, I want to rule Wano. It's like for Doflamingo, for example, it was like, oh, this is like the Dressrosa is like my family's. It's like my my destiny kind of to rule this country. Yeah. Exactly, my birth. Thank you, my birthright to rule this. While for Wano, like both of them are just looking to exploit it in their own interest, kind of.
Well, I hope we get a Kaido flashback, and in that flashback, we get to actually see Kaido and Orochi form some sort of relationship, because we're still missing that key element to
I'm
understanding their
super
character.
interested in that.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
really don't know how all this started. Where did Kaido approach Orochi? Did Orochi approach Kaido? What's their deal between the two? Is it some sort of like, you give me weapons, I'll protect the country, but also Orochi wants to destroy the country? It's kind of like there's so many questions up in the air about this
Yeah.
relationship.
What's like the real goal? And
Yeah, what's the real
also
goal? Yeah.
something that like interesting Revujo pointed out to me. I think last chapter was interestingly enough, like when we see Kaido, he has like this weird like punk outfit. Like he's wearing this weird punk outfit that like really fits well into like his image of like the rock pirate, I feel.
I think
And
it
now,
fits,
like-
it fits his image
Yeah,
of
and
his
I'm-
actual his own crew that also wears that shit.
Yeah,
So, like,
exactly.
he doesn't
And now
wear
he
that
has like
anymore.
literally, like in the current timeline, he literally has like done some like gone through some cultural appropriation, almost assimilation, where he's
Japanese
wearing
gear.
like this, this like Buddhist traditional outfit, and he's like kind of accepted this role of like this deity. So that's really interesting to me because like what was the like if he doesn't care about the like is there I'm just wondering what happened like in the 20 years since then to Kaido. I can't wait to get this part of the story because I feel that there is something there where he appears to get stronger, appears to identify more with the country in a weird way maybe.
Yeah, I hope like I think just in general there's like lots of spots that like we don't know if they're gonna be filled in. And I hope they are filled in, but then like it depends what Oda decides. Like, okay, for example, the old hag. I like the fact that Kaido killed her because it added to Kaido's character. But I also thought that we were gonna get. I don't know about you guys, but I did think at some point we were gonna get like a little bit of insight into who the
Oh,
like
yeah.
hag and like what their stories were. Those two of them.
Here's what I think is gonna happen. We're gonna get at some point, maybe end of the arc, maybe midway through the battle. I don't know. At some point, I assume we're getting a Ryuma flashback to when the borders were actually closed.
Oh, you think
He's
we're getting a
legend.
Ryuma flashback?
Because
That'd be so cool.
there's so many connections between Ryuma and the City of Gold and Odin talking about we close the borders for a reason. So that I think that reason has to do with Ryuma and his story. So if that's at the end of the arc to cap off the full message of Wano, I think that would be good because Zoro's gonna give the sword back to Ryuma, visit his grave, and then we might get the flashback there. Maybe there's a poneglyph there. Robin reads it.
Didn't he
Or his
already
legend or
give back the blade though?
Yeah, he said he already gave back the blade, but he said he did want to pay respects to Ryuma. So he will go there at the end of the arc at some point, right? Like, why say that if you're not going to go there?
Yeah,
So I
for
think-
sure.
I think like, and then in that flashback we might get more Kurozumi like lore on what they are, and if they're like this evil clan that like were out to destroy Wano from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like we might
I
get more of
definitely
that stuff
expect
there,
to get
but-
some more insights into Orochi for sure also.
Yeah,
like maybe
because
not as intensely as Kaido, but like to a certain degree for sure.
I feel like the Kurozumi kind of lore is so like weirdly like paper thin. It's like kind of looks like my grandfather was robbed for trying to take over the country, and the people of Wano, took it out on the family.
Well,
I feel like
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like there might be a little more to that story, with Wano being such an important place and maybe some Void Century stuff there. So I don't necessarily know if it's just that reason. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's too unclear for it to be just that simple reason, because it's so left open to the interpretation there. Like, you can fit a lot of stuff in there. So maybe
Which aspect of it?
So we know that the Kurozumi clan is one of the great powers of Wano that was a daimyo of one of the lands, and one of the Kazuki parents wasn't gonna have a child, and then they did, and then he got angry, tried to take it over, and then their name was dragged through the mud. What if that's more of a kind of hearsay reason why, and that maybe the Kurozumi clan had wanted to do something and achieve something in Wano that was sort of washed over by this bullshit reason? Like, there might be
that could
something
be it.
more. Yeah.
Because that shit happens a lot. Like, for example, I did like this flip on the Orochi, like who he is or his motivations, basically 2 chapters ago, I guess, because like we have got like Oda has played this up many times, the idea of like being punished for sins of the father or grandfather. Like Rebecca's entire story was that, Ace's story was that. So like now putting a villain in that spot was pretty cool, I thought. But
So if you
I do
look at-
think
yeah,
that like
if you look at
the
the
other
way-
thing, yeah.
if you look at the way Orochi has been told the story, it's from the Kurozumi perspective. So they're not going to exactly tell him that they were doing more dodgy stuff in the dark corners of Wano. Like, there could be that kind of dynamic going on as well. Maybe to sort of, flesh it out a little bit more, because it seems like it's a little bit cookie cut, a little bit not like Wano's such a rich place for history, and it's kind of just like this weird sort of offshoot kind of thing that happened.
I would say overall, so the Odin flashback overall, because this steps back a little bit into that, I guess. The Odin flashback overall, I thought was a mix of like moments that I really liked, like the last two chapters I really really liked, and then the Roger Whitebeard chapters I really liked, and then some chapters that I didn't like as strongly. Definitely the two chapters before these last two chapters, basically. But I think stepping back from the flashback as a whole, the one thing overall that I felt was missing, like I was really excited when we started the flashback from Kinemon's perspective, and it started with the narration of something like this is the tale of like Wano back then or whatever. I was hoping that so many of the things that we're seeing today would be kind of like the holes would be filled in as to what it was like back then. As in, like, I always thought that Fukurokujo and his ninja and stuff switching sides. I thought, for example, we would see that part of the story happen back then. I thought we would see these ninja before then. I thought Hyogoro leading the 5 families and stuff, like we saw, like, but it was more like a cameo. Like Hyogoro was a cameo the few times he showed up. Like I thought that we were gonna get a lot of these stories, and like the same with the 5 mob bosses that we saw today, like that were released from the prison. I just thought that we would see this whole cast of characters that are popping up in the modern day, and we would have seen sort of a larger story craft around them when we actually went back in time to Wano in the old days. But it turned out to be mainly Odin focused, even over the scabbards. So I guess my expectation was off there. But now I do feel like an opportunity was kind of lost to add more weight to all the characters today.
I kind of disagree to that, I feel, because while I agree that you could, like, while it would have been awesome to see some of these things play out in more detail and get some more information on certain things, I think we should still not go as far and like expect the full story arc out of this flashback. I think the flashback had a certain purpose, and I feel that purpose was like for me personally was definitely fulfilled. We got the insights we needed. Like we got the character of Odin introduced. There was kind of like a central puzzle piece missing for the current storyline to make sense. I personally definitely got the emotional impact of the flashback, like his death. In general, like I really like the way that Kaido and Orochi came out of this. I immensely enjoyed the Roger and Whitebeard part, even though that might have been the part that might have been a bit distracting from Odin's character as a whole. But I feel as a flashback arc, it was the longest in the history of One Piece, and it definitely did the job it was supposed to do for me, 100%.
Well, like for me, like going in depth on like the Yakuza mob bosses isn't really necessary in my mind, because they remind you of like characters like the Supersonic Duck Squad from Alabasta. They're just there to do one thing they're gonna do and then go away. Like I don't think the mob bosses are like super important characters. Like
no, it's not as in it's if I can just elaborate, like it's not as in I expected to get story arcs for each of them. I just thought that there was because it felt like there was a lot of untold, like as we're going through Wano Act 2, it felt to me like there was a lot of untold story for a lot of these characters, right? And like, for example, Shinobu, we got that, like Kinemon and stuff, like a lot of these characters we did get that, but then lots of these characters we felt like had a more interesting history to them, like Fukurokujo, obviously Shimotsuki, whatever, and the dog. You can
even look at the scabbards themselves, like Raizo.
The scabbards themselves, I've kind of removed them from the equation now, because now that's its whole own separate thing. But I do think that we could actually get more for the scabbards later on now. I felt like this was a very Odin focused flashback pretty much, but it just felt like there was like a sort of richer history to Wano that we would have seen interwoven into Odin's story, which I feel like it felt more like the characters we'd seen from before were kind of cameos. And it like Wano felt smaller than I would have expected, when in reality Oda had such a large cast of characters that could have featured or popped up and
This
stuff
is
like
what
that.
my problem was kind of with Act 2, right? Because we get all these introduction of all these, like, sort of minor side characters, hints of lore, like, your, what's his name? Hiro being the mob boss and his importance in Wano and his importance with the past with, Odin. And then we get Yasui and his whole story and his death. And then we, everyone's saying, well, just wait for the Odin flashback. It'll be fleshed out there. It's here for a purpose. Because in Act 2, to me, it felt like it was weirdly extremely fast and slow at the same time. And what I mean by that is, Oda was cramming a lot of characters into a short amount of space. So it bloated out Act 2, right? You could talk about the Udon prison scene. Some of them, you could say maybe, we don't necessarily need 5 mob bosses. You could say, do we really need Yasui in this story? And does his death really matter to the overall plot? Like, and then they're handled in a way where they're so fast paced, we can't really get a connection towards them. So it feels like a little bit of wasted time. And in this flashback, we kind of like see that the mob bosses really don't kind of matter, and they might get mentioned here or there. And then we see, like, even with the scabbers themselves, like, what's his name? Raizo, one panel. What's his name?
I wouldn't count the scabbards as much because
you think they'll get more. Yeah.
At this point, I strongly think they'll get more. Okay, maybe I'm wrong on this, so I guess that's not fair either. To say it's just that other characters I'm pretty sure won't get more, but I feel like the scabbards will at this point, just because it feels like their importance did actually elevate from the last chapter in my mind.
I just personally wonder when we. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think I'm just wondering when we got as a community, when we got from, like, because I remember like previous arcs, right? Just take the Alabasta arcs. We've been introduced to a lot of characters there, and I mean, I definitely wasn't around when that arc was happening, but I can't imagine that no one was going like, oh, well, we got introduced to this guy here who was like working for Crocodile in this casino. Like, what's his purpose? Why didn't we get more background story for his character? Or like, when are we gonna get the flashback of the history of Alabasta? Like, I understand, like, I personally am big fan of world building, and I definitely enjoy it when we get like a lot of small details for characters, for history of certain, like, whether it be political, whether it be military, whatever. Like, I enjoy these kinds of things, but I also acknowledge that some characters are just in the story for giving character to the short story and characterizing the characters, the main characters around them. Like, Yasu was definitely a character that, even if maybe he didn't impact the current plot, he was definitely a character that shaped the characters he was interacting with. Like, he gave them a frame. So I feel like if that's a single purpose of a character, but it's well written and it's still an interesting character, I don't need like a deeper purpose if it just helps me get a perspective on the people we got so far.
Well, let me ask you this question, right? Because with Yasui, like, specifically, like, what was the grand reveal with his character? It was the smiles have a side effect that make these people laugh, and they can only express one emotion. And look how bad Orochi is, right? Look how bad Kaido is, right?
Yeah, but
I feel
but he was also the type of guy who was supporting Odin, like, when he basically didn't have too many other supporters, right? Like, I feel like, I mean, you can say, okay, was that crucial to Odin's storyline? Like, he probably would have survived on his own and stuff, but it was definitely like he was always symbolized, like, he was shown to be someone who understood Odin for who he truly was. Like, he was the one who said, oh, everyone thinks he's a fool, but I believe that he's actually, like, he's gonna be a great leader. And then when Odin comes back, he's the one who's like, oh, well, everyone else may have forsaken him, but I'm aware that he is doing something else. He's doing the stupid dance for a reason. So go for it.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you rewind for Yasu, for example, in the context, like, I guess it depends. If you look at his death in isolation, it's like, well, we didn't know him as well. I personally found it like a really good death because I felt like it was one of those deaths where you could have never read one. You kind of get the story of his life very quickly in that chapter. and I felt it was done kind of effectively. But like the main thing with Yasue was the idea was his death was kind of pulling back the curtain on what Wano was like before and how far it's fallen to now. Because we'd seen that, obviously. We'd seen Okoboroe Town, we'd seen all these villages and everything like that. But his death was the catalyst. His death was basically a scene explaining that this man was once a very respected noble class man in Wano, and now he's actually fallen to this or whatever, and his death ended on that kind of a reveal. And then from then on, if you read in the context of the flow of the story from then on, most of the chapters following that are revealing more and more of like, this was Wano before, this is Wano now, this is Wano before, this is Wano now. So his death was a catalyst narrative-wise for kind of pulling back the curtain on how... Because, like, the next chapter was the smile reveal. Then after that was, like,
exactly.
the Udon prison mines, like, what they were like before to now. Then Ashura Doji recapping this was what happened after Odin left and stuff like that. And then Kawamatsu. So it was kind of a snowball that grew... that sort of thing that Oda wanted to start building on, basically.
And it's just like I said, like I feel a character can have a purpose without having an impact, like a lasting impact on the way the story progresses in a way. Like I feel some characters are just there to give characterization for a culture, for other characters around them. As you said, like with Yasuo, it was like he was, like you said, he was kind of this person guarding over Wano in a certain way. He was the one aware of what was going on. He was like the one protect or like taking the side of Odin, and like watching, like basically having that reveal and then seeing how he has failed in his task. Like I feel it gives a lot of context to a lot of the story.
Can I say so? Like Yasuo, I don't think was done dirty in the flashback of Odin's flashback. Even if I mentioned it, maybe that wasn't fair or whatever. What I mean more so is that, and you're right, like, it's a line between, like, is it fair to expect X amount from this character or not? But, for example, characters that I thought seemed to be having interesting histories that were being set up to be delved into a little more, like Fukurokujo and Hyogoro, those two supposedly had, like, they were both under Odin's wing, but the fact that one of them went one way and one of them went the other, I thought that was a conflict that we were going to get a little more meat into.
For sure, dude.
And
I definitely agree. Especially like, Hyogoro. I can live with Fukuro Kujo. I like the way I took it is, since Oda didn't show us how he betrayed Orochi, I just took that as, okay, this is like this ninja squad. They're keeping Orochi safe, but by not showing us how they actually flipped sides, like Oda is basically telling me, okay, these characters exist and they're like it's like kind of a shield and spy force in the country, but they're not really gonna have a deeper meaning. That's what I took away. With Hyogoro, I definitely agree, because Hyogoro has already, like, he's actually been in parts Luffy's mentor, coaching him. So not getting a bit more, I guess, background knowledge on his character, apart from seeing him in his prime, kind of. I do agree with you that would have been relevant, or would give a lot more to the story, because he actually is a character that actually did have a grave impact on the story by mentoring and coaching Luffy. So I definitely agree with you there, for sure. Chris, you want to say something? Sorry.
I've got a question for you both, right? Because we get that juxtaposition between Wano now and Wano in the past. Do you think it was a mistake having the factories built before Onen's death? Do you think that was a mistake on Onen's part? Because it kind of muddles the message a little bit in my mind. Because it sets up
Odin's part.
No, do you think Oda made a mistake by having the factories there before Odin's death? Because in my mind, like, it makes it kind of muddled and confusing, because we know that Odin was protecting Wano, protecting the land, and once he died, it all went to hell. But the factories being there and the forced labor and all the stuff Orochi was doing beforehand kind of muddles that message a little bit, if you know what I mean. Like, if everything was peaceful and fine before Odin's death, and it was only that way because Odin was holding up Wano with his bare will and dancing in the streets and that kind of stuff. And then after Odin's death, the factories are built, the waterways are polluted. Do you think that would have more impact than what we have right now?
I would agree, personally. Well, I'll just give mine, then you can follow, because we might differ on this, I guess. I would agree, just because, I did notice that throughout the community, it did raised a lot of questions. And so, like, obviously it's not like, oh, well, maybe some people just got it, like, are thinking about it wrong or whatever. But I think if it's something where, like, there is potential for a large amount of readers to have a misconception about it, then I do think that maybe the author could have made it more clear one way, even though I personally didn't think that at the time. Like, I thought that there was a clear line between... Okay, so spoilers for viewers, I guess. I am actually making an Odin video. I haven't made a video in, like, a long, long time, but I really liked Odin's character, and the end of the flashback I thought was a really, really strong end to the flashback. I personally preferred it to, like, Corazone's death, because I don't know why it keeps getting compared to that. I've seen that on Twitter, for example.
It's because it's the most, like, recent mentor flashback kind of thing.
I guess, yeah. Corazone's death, this is a weird tangent, I guess. For me, when we got Corazone's death, I felt like we had kind of seen this before. We'd gotten that a few times before. Maybe that's not... So, like, it just didn't hit me as hard, personally. But I know that that's a very popular death in the community or whatever. And it's hard to... Like, I prefer Whitebeard's death to Ace's death. Some people prefer Ace's to Whitebeard. So that's personal, whatever. Odin's story and the way his story was done and the way his story concluded, I felt were pretty different. And I would expand on that in the video. How'd I get on this? What was I talking about?
You were talking about Wano in the past and how...
the factories thing. Yeah, so I did think by the end of Odin's flashback, especially after last chapter, we understood that there's a clear difference between, like, Orochi, the, like, genocidal maniac who legitimately just wants to burn Wano to the ground, and what he was doing before, where he was literally, like, it was putting people to work and setting up factories, but he only had one person executed in that entire time. So it's the difference between, like, Orochi being a bad ruler, but Wano not being, like, an apocalyptic wasteland, versus if Odin wasn't stopping him. So I agree, though, that the factories are a strong visual towards making it feel like an apocalyptic wasteland. So
yeah, and
Oda maybe could have left that
Odin
out.
does comment that he turned Wano into a hellscape. He literally does.
I remember that
yeah.
quote, so I was like,
Yeah,
that's not... Yeah, it was a fine line, and
yeah.
Oda maybe played it a little too far with some people. Yeah. But overall, I think it was clear by the end of last chapter.
Yeah,
that, like,
I agree with that. I'm just...
Okay. And I remember we had this disagreement at that point. Yeah,
because...
sorry, Ohara. Long answer, as usual.
Okay, well... What I was gonna say was, like,
wait, is Ohara muted? Yeah, I see him talking. So yeah, No, you're still muted, dude.
Dead air.
Christian, are you hearing him?
I can't hear him now.
Wait,
dead?
now.
Yeah,
Shit.
you're good now.
Okay,
that was like
there we
6
go.
attempts.
It's like nothing and then shit.
Yeah,
I muted my microphone and then I just like tried pressing the button, but apparently it didn't work. I was like getting angry. I was like, stop talking over me.
No, we were.
It's like, stop ignoring me. I guess just as a quick take on that, I personally definitely do agree with Chris that, like, it probably would have been, as a visual element, been a lot more impactful to happen after Odin's death, because, as you guys said, it really does portray this apocalyptic wasteland, like kind of like Mad Max feeling almost, like with the Beast Pirates also. But then again, I feel like just from a logical perspective, obviously the factories are the biggest, if not the main reason that Kaido is there. So obviously, if Odin struck a deal with Kaido and Orochi, like that, Kaido wouldn't take the deal. Hey, I'm like, just stay put for 5 years or whatever and do nothing here. I feel like the deal was based on Kaido getting his work done, producing his weapons, building his ships, and then getting out of there. So I feel like that was an active part that Odin accepted, that, like, basically, okay, I'm gonna protect the people and Kaido can build his army and then they're gonna leave, hopefully.
Well, the common thought around the community before we actually got what happened with Odin was that Orochi took the shogunate from him, and then somehow Odin had enough of him and stormed the castle, and then Kaido appeared and took him out. Like, that was the major kind of, like, thoughts of the community of how this flashback would go down. And now we've got this, like, kind of, like, unclear alliance between Orochi and Kaido, and, like, they've been there for years, they've been working together for years, and Odin comes back during that partnership and messes it up a little bit. So, like, that's the thing, like, it became complicated, really, for kind of, like, no real reason, because we don't know the history between Kaido and Odin, or Kaido and Orochi. So, like, we have all these moving parts now in this story where in the original, because the community normally goes the simple route when trying to explain things, right? So we know a few things about this flashback before we go into it, right? Like Kaido burnt down the castle, so we assume that Kaido came in the back and took him out, and that's how it happened. Like Kaido appeared and won the battle for Orochi, and then it was the beginning of the hellscape. Like that was the original kind of idea in the community before we get this flashback. And now we have this like really complicated 5-year span of time with deals and alliances and certain degrees of tyranny and all this kind of like complicated storytelling, when I don't necessarily know if it had to be that way, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's different though, because that's like that's, and this is gonna be like maybe an unfair answer basically, but like we don't know what the theme that well, I think I have some takeaways personally basically, but there was an idea behind what Oda did with Odin, right? Like there's no reason, like him doing the 5 years loop and everything like that,
Self-sacrifice kind of hero motif.
Yes,
kind of
but
thing, yeah.
but that has to play a role into what the general idea of the story is overall. So I think when we see what Luffy and the Straw Hats go to, that should, if Oda had a reason for this, that should carry a lot more weight based on what Odin's story was.
Right.
And I personally have some takeaways from that, that I guess I would have to spend a while talking about or whatever. But I do think that it's one of those things where like we get a lot of ideas coming out of Odin's backstory. And then I think whether like what Oda's going to paint as like was bad decisions or good decisions, or where exactly was the flaw in
where did Odin go wrong? Where Luffy's
where did Odin go wrong? Because Oda clearly portrays Odin as noble, but then there's different spots that Oda could portray Odin as wrong. Was it that he always wanted to do everything himself?
Right.
That is like a very consistent
I think there's
trait
definitely
for
a
Odin.
lesson there.
There is that, but I think
For
what
sure.
the main takeaway will be more clear as the arc goes on.
Yes, I do agree.
Because that's what will be harped on basically. Or the other flaw could be that Odin was a soft-hearted type leader, and he like parallels Vivi and Riku a lot in that, but we expect different of him because really he's not Riku. He's more like a combination of Kyros and Riku. Like he's strong, unlike those other leaders, so we expect differently of him.
I would
yeah.
I would say that I took it from the beginning, kind of like as soon as it was clear that Odin was about to be this tragic character, like despite all the power, like traveling with the strongest pirate crews and like gaining this enormous level of power, despite had that he chose without blinking, he chose to simply let all that go and like make a fool of himself to basically protect his people. So I definitely I feel Oda's going for a point here where he's like, you can go wrong even if you do the noble thing, kind of.
Yeah, and he does that frequently. Like lots of times, like Hirulook's death. Hirulook did the noble thing, but it was the stupid. Like Oda does that frequently. Thing, yeah. But it just, and it's actually a lot of characters who they know, like Bellamere and her kids. Like that scene ended with basically Bellamere saying, "I can't pretend that I don't have kids, so this money is going to go towards my."
It's a noble thing, but it's a stupid.
It's always
thing.
a noble thing, but it's a stupid thing. I do understand that people feel like Oda went a bit too far in this case, when like people feel like, well, there's objectively a better thing that Odin could have done. And like, well, I think the difference is that people are like, look, it was the same result anyway in the end. So Odin didn't.
Well, that's a tragedy. Yeah, that's a tragedy.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of it. So it depends, I think, a lot of how Oda's going to write it from here on, basically, and how we're meant to view Odin's story from here. Obviously, he was a tragic hero in that sense.
I have to say that I mean, I guess you could fuck it up, but I feel like the story is so strong at this point, and I trust in Oda that much that I feel like as long as he gives us some lesson out of this for Luffy to pick up on, or for the Straw Hats to pick up on, I'm happy with that. Because I feel like there's you would really have to fuck this up to get this wrong, I feel.
If it's just a random story, then I don't think it was a fitting story for the, like, doesn't...
I mean, so Big Mom's amnesia plotline exists for some reason, so, you know. Whatever you want to say about that.
I don't know. Okay, so I was, to be fair, it was like one of these parts of Wano that I had some faults with, but I definitely didn't see it as critical as some people did, because I still think there is going to be a payoff for this. I mean, I think we've spent a lot of time on this topic. I still expect a payoff, and if that payoff is never going to come, like if Big Mom traveling with Chopper and everything, and like regaining her memory, like keeping her memories of traveling with Chopper and everyone, if this doesn't pay off ever in this arc, then I'm gonna admit
Oh,
that this
bad
was
baby.
a really that this was a really stupid thing. But I still expect this to play into like I still expect a scene where Big Mom is basically ready to give someone in the Straw Hat crew the death blow, kind of, and then this comes back in, like that this memory of her actually being treated well and like being like.
But here's the thing with that little segment. Was she treated well? Because Chopper was literally using her for her strength alone. Like, she wasn't being treated well at all. Like,
The
Chopper,
human batter grab.
yeah, Chopper was just using her for her strength.
I'm not
like
sure if
everyone
that's
else did.
fair, because I think Chopper was like he was definitely
He wasn't trying
like
to treat the
taking her
amnesia.
along,
Like,
but like it was not that Chopper was going like, oh, like I found unconscious and amnesia having Big Mom, like, oh, let's like wouldn't it be a great idea to use her to break out Luffy? It was rather that he was just being very obviously and logically careful being around her. But then I still had the impression, me personally, and please correct me if you felt differently, but I still had the impression that while Chopper was definitely scared and careful, he still, like, he and like especially the group who weren't aware that she was a Yonko definitely treated
Tama
her
and
with
Roman's
kindness.
gay, yeah. Well, I think Tama is the one who treated her the most with kindness. Chopper kind of looked kind of bad during this segment because he's supposed to be a doctor and he's just not treating the amnesia at all.
Yes,
He's like, oh, let's just use her. I'm like, all right, Chopper.
But to be fair, Chopper also was the only one who actually knew who they were dealing with. Like Chopper
Yeah,
literally
I know.
fought Big Mom.
I just feel like it's a little conflict for his character because he's the doctor, he's
It
the
is.
noble, Chopper, and then he doesn't.
And it's kind of
yeah.
interesting because I feel like now that you mention it, it kind of like carries over a bit the theme of Whole Cake Island, which was like Sanji being conflicted in his ideals between like his nobility and at the same time like protecting his crew and shit.
I don't want to get off topic, but I think Big Mom's like main theme is that she's like this almighty powerful being that just keeps on getting manipulated and used for other people's gain. Like you see that with Streusen in her flashback and things like that. You see that.
That's a good possibility.
You see that with Paraspera in the current day, like him trying to get her on track and get the cake so that they can survive. And then you see it with Chopper again, like she's in a vulnerable position, and people just constantly keep on using her for her strength. It's kind of like no one cares about her, and they just use her for her strength. But like going back to like Wano and the topic of Wano, I feel like during
That was
you
a
guys,
good point about
yeah,
Big Mom. Like, I'm gonna keep that in mind because I actually hadn't thought about that.
because the point, the thing I picked up from Wano Act 1 and Act 2 is the main theme of Wano in my mind is that it's tradition versus progress, because you have opening the borders as the main goal of the arc, which is to open the borders to let new ideas into Wano, to free it from its traditional grip. Women can't be samurai. The samurai code being kind of wrong with. You see the nobility of Onin being wrong, and you see the pollution that's happening in Wano because it's closed off. So it's kind of got that like, open up the borders, get fresh ideas in, that kind of lose the traditional nature of Wano in that kind of way. And we don't really like the problem with it. Like, I thought we were gonna get more on opening the borders, what that means for Wano, and what that means to Odin, and what that means for Orochi. Where we really didn't get that with this flashback. It's kind of strange to me because during Act 1 and Act 2, every time Odin is mentioned, he's always mentioned with the fact that he wanted to open up the borders. And I get that has to do with voice entry stuff, and we'll probably get that, end of arc when they actually open up the borders. But I think it's extremely important, even if we don't get the voice entry take on what that actually means, I think it's extremely important we get the thematic take what opening the borders means for Wano and the people of Wano. Because right now it's kind of like, let's just open the borders so a mystical being can come in and fix everything. That's what it kind of feels like. There's no real like political or thematic kind of thing about opening the borders, which I think is important for this arc for us to really get the point of Wano, which we're not really getting right now. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree.
Yes.
But I don't think that that's okay. I disagree that that's the main theme of Wano, but I do think that that's one thing that has been.
It is a theme.
That is definitely a
yeah.
theme of Wano.
Well, what do you think the main theme of Wano is? Because I'm kind of struggling
that's one
with
of
that. Yeah.
I mean, so I did a video at the end of, I want to say, close towards the end of Act 2 or something like that, where I went over many things that seem to be taking shape, but I still feel like the actual theme of Wano, and I felt like Odin's backstory is like one of the last pieces to really understanding what the whole arc is about. But then one of the other reasons that I feel like we haven't really gotten to the climax of the arc personally is because that hasn't taken shape as clearly yet. Because it's a lot of things potentially in the works. So you could say loyalty, faith, passage of time. You could say
reliability
subordinates.
on your subordinates. Yeah.
There's like what it takes to be a good king. There's like a lot of things that were taking shape earlier and aren't as strong now. But now Odin's kind of introduced this whole other realm of ideas or possibilities, because I don't know how that's going to take shape basically. So what Wano's main theme is right now is hard to tell basically. But there's a lot of ingredients in the pot. I do think that there's like a larger idea that will take shape by the time we get to the actual climax.
And I feel this kind of mirrors to a certain extent the entire storyline, because while there definitely are, I mean, you do a lot of videos on that, Morj, there are definitely visible themes in the story, like that go throughout the story, like freedom, friendship, and so on and so forth, of course. I feel or maybe you have a different take on this, but I feel personally it's really hard to tell what the big theme of the story is, and I think that will probably also stay hidden until we go into the final, in the end game of the real end game of the story.
Oh, you're saying One Piece, the
what's
story
the lesson
of One Piece?
Yeah, what is the big lesson of One Piece? And I feel like obviously we will not be able to not be able to say what that is until we got the result
I'm pretty sure that's going to be
basically
freedom,
Luffy's
though.
journey.
I'm pretty sure that's
It's
gonna be
freedom, but it's
might
I do have a
be.
video on that right now. It's freedom, but it's a more complex idea of freedom than
I hope it's
think people
I hope
usually
it's
give it.
anarchy freedom and not some fucking world government dragon took over because he's the good guy bullshit. I hope it's
No,
like,
that's not.
yeah.
I mean,
No, I mean,
hope-
we're
yeah.
literally like talking over. Yeah, I mean, freedom is definitely like one of the top contenders, but there's definitely other themes that might also crystallize to be like the dominant one, and I think it's still hard to say right now because I feel a lot of that will actually be dependent on how the story resolves in the end and like what
yeah.
direction we're taking.
I feel like, well, One Piece, it's a pirate story, so the idea of freedom comes through that pirate lens of we're free on the seas, we do what we want, but we have our own codes. We look
But like
after our
that can't be the
crewmates.
vision for that can't be like the vision. You know what? Like my thing is like if it's freedom, that will still, like Morj says, there has to be nuance on that because, well, obviously we're saying like the freedom of the pirates with Luffy. Like Oda clearly also shows us the bad side of pirates, and like I think that the message of the story can't be, oh, in the world I imagine as an author, like me as Oda, like the world I imagine as it should be from this bad world should be that everyone should be a pirate and roaming on the seas. Like I doubt that that's the message.
There's a school of thought about anarchy freedom, which is like basically just piratism and how that works in the grand scheme of the world. I don't know if it's necessary to like, you can't really say that that's like a bad idea because like it's like imagine communism, imagine the opposite side of communism. That's basically anarchy freedoms, right? Which is basically
I'm not
no
sure. I
government,
think anarchy
no
is the
rules.
opposite of having any sort of governmental
Exactly.
institution.
I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen at the end of One Piece. Dragon's not going to take over and be like, I am now the king of the world. I'm going to run it properly. Like,
I don't think so.
I don't
disagree.
think it's
I think that the
personally.
revolutionaries will. I'm definitely sure that there is going to be some sort of governmental institution. The question is, will that be like literally like similar how people with Game of Thrones speculated, or will that be democracy? Like, will the world government be broken down and like the people will actually choose their leaders, or will it be like someone like Vivi stepping in and becoming the new like smart or like knowledgeable leader of the world? But I don't think that it's going to be like everyone for himself. You're free to do what you want, but like you're also on your own. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Let's break this down, right? Because the world government right now, in the eyes of the world, is run as a democracy with kings going to the revelry and placing bets on what they want to happen and things like that.
But like that's not really a democracy, is
situation-
it? It's a meta democracy where like dictatorships are basically
It's a world. It's
author-
basically like it's a world government, and the people who are in the seats of power don't change. So like, they have a responsibility for their countries, but they don't really have to do that, and they get to vote on world events, world things. Well, I don't know. I don't want to get
It's
too.
really the fact that the world nobles can do whatever, right? So if
I
a
don't wanna
world
get-
noble
yeah.
says, "I don't want this anymore. I want this country gone," then it's gone.
I don't want to get. I
regardless.
don't want to get too political on the show, right? But it's
Yeah.
basically the EU, right?
No, let's
Because
get
it's run
political.
by. It's an organization like having massive say in Europe.
Is it?
with
Because I'm not sure if that's a fair
not like-
comparison.
No, but
Like-
Christian, in this, there's like a secondary body called the World Nobles, which basically make it so that
There's a
the
difference there,
actual voting EU body
Yeah.
doesn't really matter.
Plus
at the
there
end
is
of the day.
this.
Like they're talking
Plus
about
there
a
is
great
this
purge right
hidden.
now.
Plus
Yeah.
there is like, I mean, good point for everyone who is like following a lot of conspiracy theories. But like, there's basically this character who in the who's ruling everything from the shadows without anyone knowing. Plus, I think the difference is like, I guess. So first of all, it's a fake democracy in that sense that there is this hidden ruler and the nobilities like the celestial dragons, but also like the leaders who are coming together of all these countries, like they are not like they themselves are not
But I think
democratically chosen.
Look, I think it's a bad message for having. The problem is the people at the top rather than the problem is the system itself. Because over generations, you can have bad people take power in your system. The system has to be properly run and controlled. Because the world government might not have started as this as its world dominating power. It could have started as the democracy that we all know from like the real world or whatever. And then Aimu takes over from the shadows and is controlling it with the celestial dragons. But if you just remove the celestial dragons, remove Aimu, that situation can happen again. You haven't really fixed the issue. You've just prolonged the issue.
I'm not
Well,
sure if that's.
Christian, what you're, I think you might be looking for more so like exact. I don't think Oda's ever going to give an exact. Okay. So there's a difference, right? Did you guys freeze for me? No, you're not frozen, right? So to me, it comes down to Dressrosa because Dressrosa was very heavily pushed as basically being an example of the world in miniature, right? So with Dressrosa, the idea that Oda was pushing throughout it was that basically the best king for Dressrosa was King Riku. But King Riku was a weak king because he never was actually able to enforce a lot of his power, was easily toppled, stuff like that. But the people still viewed him as a good king. That's kind of an idea that Oda pushes throughout the story, that the perfect form, like there's some sort of a sweet spot of balance where you need some rules and you do need some sort of a leader, but it can't be some sort of authoritarian leader that it forces its will upon everybody. I don't think Oda is ever going to say like, well, this particular political system is the answer to my beliefs because One Piece is a romance. So what he's trying to create at the end of the story is a more romantic, not realistic type world. Probably his ideal of a world of like, look, the world is happy in the end because X, Y, and Z has like it's taken this sort of shape. But I don't think you would be satisfied in that like, oh well, this is clearly a political system that's gonna sustain
Collapse,
itself over the
yeah.
next like 200 years. You know what I mean?
Because like Dragon,
Does that make sense?
To me, it all relies on Dragon because he is the political ideology of Oda, right? Because he's the one trying to take down the world government, so he has
He
to
is.
have.
Don't
But we
Like,
don't know what
we
his
don't know what
exact-
like yeah
He
we
might
don't know
be a
what the
madman,
revolutionaries
for all we
actually
know.
plan to do. Like, do the revolutionaries do they just like take down the government and then it's like, okay, like you guys are free now, like figure it out yourself? Or is it like we just want to improve the system, or we want to change the system, or we want to like abolish the entire system? Like I feel like there's a lot of nuance to that, important nuance that we just don't know yet.
One thing they said specifically was they don't. Sabo was like, we don't. This was a surprising quote to me at the time. But it was like,
something
we
about
don't.
pirates, right? Or was it?
No, it might have been the chapter that the revolutionary commanders were introduced. It was like, we don't want to take down the the world government. We want to take down the world nobles or something. So I don't know how consistent that's going to be over
If you
time.
look, at the introduction of the commanders of the revolutionaries, you got what's her name, fucking Bello Betty, the cheerleader girl. She's basically saying, "We will give you the inspiration to fight for your own freedom," which is more of a kind of what I was saying before, with more of a open-ended view of freedom, which is complete freedom, which is, you can break that down in multiple ways. So the revolutionaries always confuse me because it's like, on one hand, they're supposed to be this like major force in the end game, but we don't get anything from them, and when we do, it's kind of like Zabo saying things like that, and then Bello Betty coming in with her own statements, which kind of like confuses it a little bit for me.
But I think I don't know. I don't know if those are like mutually exclusive statements. Because wanting to fight for, because being oppressed by the world, nobles as it is, or being under the thumb of the world government as it is, you can fight against that for a better system, basically. Like, that's usually what, like, when rebellions happen and stuff, it's not so that people are like, well, there's no more government in the end after it. Like, that never happens. The rebellions are always to put something better in place. So I don't think those are different.
Well, they go, get rid of a king, put a democracy in, right?
I don't know exactly what, because Oda doesn't even seem to be against the idea of kings. He likes the idea of, like, the Cobra family, the Riku family. I think what he's just pushing for is, like, a more romantic world.
Because, that's what I mean when I say what's the real theme of One Piece, because, like, Oda gives us a lot of different shadings on a lot of different concepts. We have good Marines and bad Marines and, like, good Marines pirates, somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And we have good kings, bad kings, and kings somewhere in the middle. And we have good pirates, bad pirates, and, like, pirates that are somewhere in the middle. So, like, the message there, of course, is, like, okay, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It, like, rather depends, like, what take you do. Yeah. Like, obviously being a government can be a good thing, but only if you act in the right way. Same as, like, being a pirate can be a good thing, but only if you act in the right, like, these types of takes. So I still think that, because that's, like, the premise of, like, writing fiction is, like, still, most authors still put some of their own personal idea for, like, what's my ideal world gonna be like in there. Like, whether the hero is gonna achieve that world is a different question, but, like, he definitely has an idea for how society should be like. And I feel Oda has, so far in the story, just shown us that obviously there's not this one good, like, good bad, like, pirates good, world government bad, or the other way around, but there's, like, nuance to it. But I still expect there to be, at the end of One Piece, that there's either, I mean, it's possible that Oda goes the way and says, like, okay, well, Luffy failed and, like, the world sinks in chaos, like, whatever. I don't think that. But I do think that at the end, if there's a stable system and people actually do live in freedom and happiness, that Oda is going to introduce a system that he personally believes would work in that world.
I just think that that's not a, like, because I think Oda has already given us examples of what he views as ideal nations. So, like, Skypiea with Gonfall in charge, Dressrosa with Riku in charge. These are all nations that he portrays as, like, ideal nations. They're just not realistic. So that's, to me, that's always the split. I don't think Oda's ever going to come up with, like, the perfect governmental system.
Where do you take away that, like, but wait, like, I do see, like, obviously there's systems that are portrayed as good because they have a kind leader. But at no point did I personally take away, like, where did you take away that Oda portrays this as his ideal of how a country should be run? Because I don't take that away from that.
Because that's, like, Dressrosa under King Riku was consistently portrayed as basically being, like, the ideal nation. Like, I think that's general. And, like, Skypiea under Gonfall was basically portrayed as being, like, a conflict-less, peaceful nation. Like, the weakness of those nations, as it's pointed out, is, like, you need a strong ruler in charge to be able to enforce your rules. And that's kind of where the reality of it comes in that you need people like a Luffy or a Kiros and stuff to come in and stop that sort of thing from happening. But in the ideal world, yeah, like, the ideal world would basically be, like, no one can force their will on each other, period, basically. But that's not a realistic world. I strongly
disagree with that, I think, with that view. I personally think that Oda is showing us that, like, no matter the system, if there's kind-hearted people in charge, the system can work. No matter if it's, like, a world government under, or, like, the Marines under Aokiji, might be Marines that actually are able to enact justice, just like a Luffy is able as a pirate to bring peace to islands, just as a King Riku or as Neptune is able to actually lead their people well. I don't think at any point that he says, okay, this is the ideal system. Like, you could also say, based on Luffy, since it's his main character, okay, Luffy is, like, the ideal, like, you need a kind-hearted leader who brings people together. Like, you could also say that's his ideal system. I personally think it's rather Oda showing us the different shadings of different systems, and then he will go to one point where he's like, I at least hope that there is more nuance to it, where he's like, okay, well, we know that, like, if we have a king, if it's a good guy, it might be super, like, the country might flourish, like, under King Riku. But, like, if the next king, if the son or someone else takes over it on the same system is a Doflamingo, it will all go to hell. So I think that Oda is planning to introduce a system to us that he personally thinks is sustainable enough to to deal with bad people coming in and like enables good people to come in. And whether that's democracy or a different kind of system, like I don't know, that's up to Oda, but I personally don't think, like, I don't see the vision. I don't agree with the nuance that Oda is showing us. Okay, the world should be like you said, basically, like Dressrosa being the miniature. Like now under King Riku, that's how the world should be. I think I wouldn't agree with that stance.
I don't know. I think that that's just generally like what I've taken away from the series. Like there are clear systems where basically, okay, so if you go backwards, I guess I take it like, okay, so starting at the end point, which is that I think that One Piece, it's a story about dreams, and I think that the future that, or the vision that Oda has, is a vision of a dream world. I don't think it's ever going to be a realistic world, because I think frequently what's the conflict that's coming in between is like, ideally things should be like this, but realistically you need this. Like that's Luffy and Vivi's conversation in the desert, stuff like that. And generally what it comes down to is as I see it, what Oda believes a perfect world would be where everybody is free to do whatever they want, but nobody forces their will upon each other. That's his vision of an ideal world in my mind, and I think that is like everybody has their freedom, but nobody is suffering for their freedom because somebody else is forcing their will upon them.
So how's
but that's not a realistic world, and that's the type of, so those kings that are more soft-hearted, less controlling and stuff, they're frequently overthrown by people who want to control. There's no sort of perfect system to prevent this from happening. All we can have in the end basically is kind of
because then, okay, that's really interesting, because I feel like we have like really different
but if you look at all the motivations of all the villains, it's always god complexes. I was wronged by the world government, I was wronged by the world. So the stem of the problem,
I don't know, Blackbeard is
itself.
pretty much a Luffy. Like he wants to be free, right? He wants to do what he wants, and he's basically the bad side of this dream.
But Luffy,
he's the other far end, basically. Like,
yeah,
that's the point. I think it is a dream vision that Oda's trying to come up with. I don't think that there's going to be like some perfect like governance system. Like what Dressrosa ended in, which is meant to be a happy ending, is they've got Riku back in charge, and everybody's very happy that they have Riku back in charge, even if realistically he's not a militarily strong king. So I think basically if we get to a point where Luffy does liberate the world from all sorts of oppressive forces, then the world that is formed by the end of One Piece would say Vivi in charge or something like that. No greater authority controlling the smaller islands and stuff like that. That would be the ideal world that is formed. I don't think we're gonna have a specific like democratic system put into place or like a constitution that makes it stay that way.
Do you think if it's like, this is the UN, it has no power, but it's just an agreement between countries? Is that what you think is gonna happen? Like a UN situation?
I don't know.
I'm gonna give you a perspective like how I've seen it so far, and it's actually really interesting because I guess I've never like thought about it actively, just like believed it or like thought about it that way. So it's maybe interesting to talk about it, because for me, like when you say, okay, there's this conversation between Luffy and Vivi, and like there's this ideal system, but you're probably never gonna get there. You're just gonna get as close as you can, kind of. Like the way I took it personally, and like this is obviously, I agree with you in the real world that there is probably no perfect system, but I say since it's fantasy, the way I took it is that Oda basically said the world was good and quote-unquote flawless as long as the ancient kingdom existed, because this kingdom managed to create a system where the world was actually free and these people were free and it was safe. And then the world government came in as like, for whatever reason, for greed or power, and they destroyed this balance or this utopia that was existing in this world by some means. And then since then, even though there have been attempts made by individual countries and on small levels where there have been struggles to basically create freedom or peace, as long as the system of the world government exists, there cannot be true peace and true freedom in the world. That's how I took it. And so I personally thought that would mean at the end of One Piece, most likely that the system we had under the Ancient Kingdom will be in some way or form reestablished in the One Piece world.
Can I get my thought in real
yes,
quick?
Please.
And then
please, because I'm really curious, really curious.
That's a really good point that you did bring up, because the world got, like, the Ancient Kingdom times is at least fairly speculated to have been, like, the golden era of the One Piece world or whatever. But I think, to me, that just comes down to what's the most likely case, that they were a ruling power that had governing power, but chose not to abuse it. And that's the ideal world. And that's not necessarily a quirk of the system. That's more like a King Riku being in charge. That's like a Gonfall being in charge. That's like a Cobra family being in charge. It's the people who are in charge, I think, where they govern, but without abusing their power or controlling. I don't know if I feel like it's a quirk of the, like, who should be a good ruler, rather, like, what's the ideal vision of the ruling power in the world versus what's the system that makes sure that it stays that way. Because the fact is, the world government, I mean, the ancient kingdom was overthrown and stuff like. Oh, well, that's not its fault, I guess. But yeah, Christian.
Yeah, just quickly, Chris, before you jump in, just
sorry.
like one thing, I just want to make clear to, like, I'm definitely not saying like what you're proposing is not gonna happen. Like, I definitely see that that's a way Oda could take the story. I'm just like, all I'm saying is I personally wouldn't like that way of taking the story, and I haven't seen it that way so far. But that's not saying I couldn't see that happening, because you're obviously correct that like these kingdoms have been portrayed in a positive way. But I personally actually have thought that like he's gonna try to basically show us all the systems that exist and introduce a better one. Sorry, Chris, you go. I didn't want to interrupt you.
So, if you look at the ancient kingdom, right, we know they had massive power and massive influence over the world, right? But their fall caused 800 years of oppression, right? So clearly, there has to be something wrong with that system, or it's just going to happen again. So,
what?
You know
you
what
mean
I mean?
the system? But like, if this,
yeah.
how is something wrong with the system that? Because like the problem was not the system, the problem was the system failing, right? Or are you talking about the ancient kingdom or the world government?
Yeah, the ancient kingdom, right, had a system in place.
Yeah, and that worked apparently, no?
It worked for a certain amount of time, and then it fell to chaos for 800 years and was a hellscape for the world.
But we don't know why it fell. Like, was that like you know?
But here's my thing, right? If you look at sort of French literature and that kind of thing on sort of rebellions and what freedom actually means, like they always talk about how like there could always be a good king or a bad king, but the fact that there's a king always means that there will be a period of oppression, and therefore democracy will limit or reduce the amount of oppression that happens to the people. So I think if we go for again, it's never going to be perfect, right? We can all agree on that. Political systems are never going to be perfect, but I think like that kind of thinking is more of the way One Piece is going to end, where it's like, sure, we've seen good kings, we've seen bad kings, but at the end of the day, I think all kings will result in some sort of oppression in the timeline, because you look at the ancient kingdom, right? They had control of the world. There was a golden age. It was all good, and then their technology was used against them. They were overthrown. And that power was used to create a dark period of history of 800 years of oppression. So if we just go back to the ancient history, we're just repeating a cycle. You know what I mean? We're repeating the cycle. We want to break free of the cycle that started in the ancient history. So I think if we sort of decentralize the world and everyone goes, to their own countries and it's democracy run, and then there's a UN that overlooks countries that run by democracies, I think that's a better message overall for the story of One Piece.
I get what you're saying, but I'm not sure I would put the breaking point at the same spot as you did, because what you're basically saying is since it was possible for the ancient kingdom to be abolished, like there was a flaw with the system. Well, I'm rather taking it from the point that there was this perfect system and someone forcefully tore that down, that system, but we want to get back there.
But my thing is, right, the problem is the centralized nature of the system, right? Because it's all in one spot. It's all the power is held in one place, right? The world government.
But do we know that? Like, for me, we know, the ancient kingdom could just be the ancient kingdom. In my mind, could just be the entire planet being like they're actually being like individual countries like working together, just like organizing themselves in freedom and peace.
True. We don't know what the system
Like we
was in
literally
ancient
don't know.
history.
Like the system could be like one dominating force that was just like
Good, yeah,
keeping
a
the
good
world's
dominating
balance.
force, yeah.
Exactly. So I feel like that really depends on like what the ancient kingdom turns out to be, whether that's like one giant actual kingdom or a giant democracy or just the world, the One Piece world as a collective being stable and governed collectively. Like could be a lot of different things.
The worst case scenario in my mind for the ending of One Piece is that Dragon takes over the world government and he's the good guy, so it won't go bad. Like I think that's
I don't
the
think
worst
that's
possible outcome.
dude. I don't think Dragon's story ends in
Definitely.
yeah,
ends in
maybe
death.
not trying. Okay, I think he'll be happy that the world government will not be a thing at the end. But I just look at Dragon and I see him wearing his dark clothes and his
You
his
think
like
he's a
tattoo
villain?
on his face.
What's going on?
I think no, not that he's a villain. I'm just saying like this doesn't look like a guy who's gonna get the happiest ending or whatever. Basically,
Well,
like
whoever takes over,
definitely-
Zabo, whatever,
No,
Whoever
for
takes
sure.
over.
Yeah,
Sabo, I
I mean,
think, will get
the
a happy
reason
ending.
the reason why it's, for example, much more likely to have a VV as a future leader of the story in the story is like that is a character like obviously you need a character that's been introduced relatively early on in the story, and we also relatively early on know that this is a very competent person. So with the VV, it would make sense because we actually do know like that she's able to govern. We know she's a good person. We know that she is smart enough to govern. So whether like Morj says that will be in the form of Vivi actually being the new Emu, but like the good person and the right person to create
I don't think she's
actually
got Buster Call power. Basically.
to real but like to bring real peace like was like we saw like in Dressrosa or in Alabasta, but on a big scale. Like whether it's that or whether it's the world coming together as a democracy and still electing Vivi as like their, I don't know, president,
I could see
whatever.
that too. Yeah, I haven't thought about it to that degree exactly what the final
State of the world,
like
whatever, yeah.
state of the One Piece world is. I just know if I had to think in my head, it's like, oh, it'll be good, right?
Yeah.
Everyone will be happy.
Yeah,
Sure,
everyone's
that's
good.
the general.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
there is still the chance. I mean, we've talked about this previously. There's still the chance that Oda throws like a complete curveball, and like the ending of One Piece goes in like a completely different direction.
Yeah,
and like the
it's,
focus,
it's the
the
dream
focus is
of
on
an
something
ancient
completely
being, and then
else.
it gets destroyed. I don't know. Some crazy
yeah, or
shit.
the focus might just not be that heavy on like what's the system, but the focus is
get-
rather
I
on
get-
something completely different.
I've been talking about this for a while now.
Yeah,
With like, I've been talking about this with not with Morj, with Drit specifically, because he's like so focused on like the ancient history and like it's going to expose the world government as what they are and that kind of stuff. But I'm like, does the ancient history actually matter to the characters that are going to find it out? Like, if Luffy learns about the ancient history, does that change his mind in the fact that the world government's already doing bad things? So like, how does the ancient history like turn everyone against the world government when everyone already knows the world government has things like slavery, has things like impel down, a completely immoral jailing system? Like,
I think the ancient history is rather gonna reveal how the world turned out to be the way it is.
but like, do you think that's a rallying cry to call everyone to
No.
attack the world government?
No, but I think it's
But I
gonna
don't
be
think-
I think it's gonna hold the secret of how to tear it down, the world government.
well, the thing with the world government is that it's not overtly like we went 400-ish chapters through the series before finding out that the world government is really bad. So the world government in One Piece is actually done, I think I think it's like one of the best dystopias I've ever seen, because it's the perfect example of like there's dark stuff underneath that's really, really dark, but you can travel through it for a long time and not realize that it's that bad, because it's not painted as that bad for the longest time. In fact, it takes like a long time for us to... It's painted as not the best, but it takes a long time for us to understand, because the world government controls all the information. So stuff like Ohara, that's them flipping it as there were demons on Ohara, we had to eliminate them. Like the vast majority of the world, and there's
They
like lots of
believe,
quotes
yeah.
showing this,
They believe in
doesn't
the world
realize the world
government.
government is that bad.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
take
yeah.
stuff like... So that's the point. But Kristen, so it's not that the ancient history will reveal that. At least last that I saw during the Reverie, there was a very important quote from the Gorosei while they were walking around. They were basically saying, Alabasta's learned too much or something like that. The fate of the world, like things have come to a crucial juncture or something. It's time for a great purging. So I think that there will be a big reveal moment where the world government does start going into a certain attack-heavy mode,
Like they
and
are
that
right
will
now,
be...
yeah.
Yeah, that will be
So,
concurrent with ancient history stuff being revealed, and it'll all come together at roughly the same
Well,
time.
if you look the more we're hearing about the world government, the more we understand that the people of the One Piece world don't like them. Like, we just recently found out about the heavenly tribute for, like, the people living in poverty because they have to pay this tribute, and the Navy not looking after them when pirates attack. Like, we saw it on that, whatever that island's called with Peachbeard and the Revolutionary Commanders. Like, we know the population of the One Piece world has pretty big issues with the,
I'm
But
not sure. I might disagree
it's varied
with
though,
you.
because it's not such a black and white issue because
agree.
for large part, like you can go back to Water 7 and there's lots of quotes like when stuff is happening to Tom, like, oh, why would the world government do something like frame somebody? Why would like people believe that the world, like, it's at that sweet spot where people clearly, like, the world government is clearly not a good ruler to them, but the people still view it as their government. So like that's the sweet spot here.
I also think that it's been portrayed that like many people, while they definitely don't like paying the money, like at least those countries that are relatively flourishing and like are easily able to pay that tribute, I feel like it's been established that those do view the world government as something that is bringing peace to the world, especially during the Summit War, where like people are actually
people wanted the
waiting
Marines
for
to
the
win
world
and stuff
government to
like
bring
that.
peace and like end Whitebeard.
I think it's, but again, I agree that it's not just the ancient kingdom history, because that's people finding out like I feel like that's one of the big, like I feel like it's concurrent. It goes hand in hand with whatever the world government making their big move, that kind of exposes them. So I think that there's a big exposing moment, and I think that happens with like a lot, like Dressrosa. Everybody thought that Doflamingo was a great ruler until there was a big exposing moment that people realized all of the stuff that he'd done, basically. I think that's going to happen on a larger scale, essentially.
Okay. Well, let's bring it back to the chapter, right? What do we think about...
Oh, shoot.
What do we think about Luffy being this kind of deity figure that we keep on getting now? What do you guys think about this? Because it's already keeps on saying someone will appear 20 years later to finish this mission of the ancient history. We have to be ready for him, to work with him so we can do it. Like, what do you guys think about this Joy Boy reincarnation sort of situation? What do you guys think about that?
I personally do not like reincarnation. Like, it depends how Oda does it. If it's more so like, one, if Luffy's a literal reincarnation of Joy Boy, like the same person born again and again, I would be very happy, because to me that kills a lot of the idea of inherited will, because inherited will, inherited will is such an awesome idea for this story to be built on. Like, it makes it such a, like, it makes it perfect for lots of like emotional heavy flashbacks and stuff, and like a lot of like one theme carrying through the entire story. But inherited will dies as a concept if it's just the same person literally being passed, like reincarnating over and over. So I don't like that. I also don't like the idea that Luffy is kind of pigeonholed into this. I love the idea that there's a prophecy or a belief that one day, 800 years of will be passed down and somebody will come pick up that mantle. And Luffy happens to be the person who's capable of picking up that mantle. I view that as different than saying 800 years from now, Luffy will do this, if that makes sense.
Now, that's kind of my take on that is what your take is more. It's more of the Luffy will fill the role that people think will happen. It's not like Luffy is literally the reincarnation of this great person that was destined to do all this from the start, and that nothing that Luffy did actually mattered because he was always destined to do it. Like, I don't think that's what's gonna happen. Also, like, we know the future isn't set because things like Future Sight exist, and Capone says you can change the future. So, like,
they say it like all the time. They're like, I saw a pretty bad future, I got it. Yeah, like, so that's a common theme of it. So I do think that Oda could be setting us up to believe one thing, but actually go like a fresh direction.
Because also at the end of the chapter, it makes it seem like it's a collection of people. Like, this group of people will turn up to save Wano and do it. More like not necessarily one. And if you really think about it, both Luffy and Law are the ones who started this war. It's not just Luffy. Like, there are people. It's an alliance. There are people involved in this situation. So, like, will Luffy turn out to be the man who takes the title of Joy Boy? Probably. Like, yeah, probably. But, like, there are people around him also with the Will of D. We know Law already has the Will of D, right? We know that. It's probably going to turn out Kid has also a D. And
I hope Kid is not a D, by the way, personally.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, like, in a kind of story way. Like, 3 Ds will appear to take down Carter and, like, open up Wano's borders.
Well, Yeah, I guess my take on it, like, I definitely agree that I would be very disappointed if it was like a literal reincarnation thing. But I personally still believe this is about inherited will, and I also,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, hope at least that Oda introduces this prophecy stuff so Luffy can break it to a certain degree or fulfill it in a different way. Like, I still,
That's what Luffy does.
yeah,
I agree.
exactly. So it's like, okay, there exists this expectation and this has to be done, but then, like, kind of like fuck prophecy, and Luffy does it his own way.
Also, with this prophecy thing, it makes it seem like even more so that opening the borders is a physical thing. Like, it has to be something physical. Like, it doesn't make any sense if it's not physical, because it's just like talking about a concept. Like, we have to conceptually open Wano's borders.
I guess it has something to do with the weather, no? Like with the
Weather and
currents.
the cliffs and the lower Wano back into the
Because like the
ocean,
currents are
essentially.
because like once like if the ocean was calm, you could just go through the waterfall into Wano. Done, kind of, no?
But there's still a barrier
Like
there.
the
So I
weather.
think- yeah.
But it's literally said that
yeah.
the weather is the
Is the
the
issue.
big issue with Wano.
Well, I think Wano being raised in the ocean is kind of like a metaphor for the Red Line as well, because they're both raised out of the ocean. They're both massive barriers. They both have things on top of them that are sacred and that, it's hard to get to and that are separate from the world. So I think it's kind of like a parallel to the Red Line. So, because there's definitely ancient history shit on Wano, right?
Yeah.
So I think the same technology that made the Red Line also rose Wano out of the ocean.
Oh, that's actually really interesting.
So the same
So
technology.
you think
might be
Wano
used
will
to
literally
evolve.
go back into the ocean?
Yeah.
Like it will
I think-
literally become another
I
island
think,
again?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. It's like
'Cause it's both.
it
It's
just
both
fits.
like you can't just have a symbolic opening of the borders. There's
No,
real,
yeah, I
like,
agree with you
impact
there.
Like there's no, yeah.
The only thing where I feel that there must be a difference to the Red Line is that like Wano, like opening the borders, if that means actually lowering the entire country down, like Wano still has to be an island. While lowering the Grand Line doesn't change shit, only that like there's still it's still separating the sea. I mean, you can cross it more easily, but like the Red Line actually
they
has
lower
to
it-
sink
lower
into
it-
the ocean,
Yeah,
no?
they lower it, sink into the ocean. Yeah, that's more what I meant. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think, like in the grand scheme of things, I think Uranus is a terraforming weapon, right? Like, ancient weapon, the terraformer. So that's how the world's been made, and that's how
That's
Wano was
actually
raised and
very,
shit.
very. Yeah, that's very likely.
Yeah.
I
'Cause we
like
need-
my
yeah,
theory,
we need
but I
something like
agree that fits a bigger missing hole
Yeah.
in general. But I still like my theory. I'm gonna stick with my theory.
Okay, you stick.
Okay.
with
Do you
that.
guys want
Let's
to do
slowly-
questions, by the way?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh?
I mean,
Or
we
no, go
talked-
ahead. Whatever you guys were saying a second ago.
We basically
Oh.
talked about every aspect of the chapter now. Like,
We
Yeah,
kinda
let's
did,
slowly move towards questions, no?
but yeah. We talked a lot off topic, but yeah, I think just time wise, let's talk about the questions real quick.
Yeah. You want to pick something?
Yeah, Christian, you want to pick?
how do I pick
Christian
questions?
can pick.
So go to Ohara's tweet.
They're on my Twitter.
Twitter.
Okay.
Wait. Let's see what we got. Prepared.
See, on our show, we read every question.
Yeah, good luck with that. I still have to do some studying.
Let me turn on.
Oh.
Let me turn on some
yeah.
Wi-Fi. Right?
I'm gonna sleep soon.
Let's see.
you just want to go Morj until I find it?
Oh yeah, sure. For a second, I thought you meant go as in like leave, like because I just
Go.
said I'm sleepy. You're like,
Just
you just want to
go,
go.
Morj.
It's like no, I can hang around till the end of the podcast. Shit. Okay. Marshall D. Jake asks, "What other familiar devil fruits would you like?"
Go.
What?
Go. Okay. Oh, okay.
Guess I'm done. Enjoy the rest of the
Just,
podcast.
leaving
Marshall
the
D. Jake asks, "What other familiar devil fruits would you like to see being used by a character from the past?" That's a weird question, just because it's like most devil fruits. I guess.
I guess.
Like, yeah, any devil fruit.
Oh, the obvious
Like, very,
answer.
very-
I think the obvious answer is the gum fruit, just to like get the history of that.
Oh.
But, like,
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. It'd be so weird if like
Though to be honest,
Kind
I
of sad
actually
at it.
don't like. I'd rather prefer it if the Gamga like. I mean, obviously, it would be cool to see like, oh, like I don't know, like Rocks had the gum fruit or like some shit, and like, oh yeah,
oh
Luffy
that'd
has
be
it.
wild if Rocks had the
Luffy
gum fruit.
Luffy has like inherited this powerful fruit from this powerful guy, but I think it's so much nicer to see like Luffy succeeding by having this kind of random looking fruit. Like it's like, oh, like there's the Logia lava fruit and the Logia ice fruit and the darkness fruit, and then you have like the main character who is literally like made of rubber, which is like like now that we see what Luffy can do with it, it's really cool. But like when you just hear the concept for the first time, it's like, okay, well, that kind of sucks. So I think it's like nice that we see a character exploring this apparently weak fruit and like actually turning it into something awesome. I think that's a nicer concept.
The character doesn't have to be some legendary character that also had it. It could be like just a random.
You mean just a random?
I'm just
guy?
more interested in the lore of it than like the actual like guy. Like like who else used it? Did they use it differently?
Yeah,
like,
you mean with the Kurozumi, like you have the woman with the face fruit, and then like the guy with the berry fruit, and then there's just like this random derpy guy, like Orochi's cousin, like bouncing around in the background with the gum fruit.
Yeah. Completely not using it at all. Yeah. All right. I got a question from friend of the show, Silvers.
Oh yeah.
Right. Given how things have been going, do you think the Marines showing up would help the arc or further bring it down? In your opinion? Do you think the Marines are showing up and will help the arc? Well, the Marines are already there in a kind of way. So yeah.
I think it helps because just the scale. Like Wano has a really big conflict going right now. But it's different than the Marineford conflict where like Marineford was so beautiful because it was characters that we had been individually hyped up for over like a massive scale, like Mihawk and then Aokiji, then Kizaru, then Doflamingo, then Kuma, like. Every single character that we had been individually hyped up for over like 500 chapters worth of storytelling, like all of them were put into the same ballpark, and then we get Whitebeard out of nowhere with like all these strong fighters who were getting it. Like that's what made it so exciting. With Wano, we've got a big cast, a really exciting cast, but we don't have as many of the like besides Kaido and Big Mom. I think those are the kind of two like really spicy names that we've got right now. But I think throwing in a lot of the Marines would really get it back to that, like topping Marineford. Like because Marineford is not just about the numbers, right? Like Wano has more characters, obviously, but it's.
I'll chuck in. Do you think the Warlords are also turning up to Wano? Do you think it's possible?
I don't think all of them, but maybe selective Warlords. Also, yes, I would put the nuance on it that I think the Marines should come to Wano, but I don't think they should come to the Fire Festival. I personally, I think I've said this a couple of times, like if the Fire Festival is like not the final big battle of Wano, I would like it to have the Fire Festival be like the conflict, the island specific, arc specific conflict, and then the final like conflict in Wano being like on the greater scale towards Marineford.
Ohara, would you like it if in my mind, if I'm imagining, continuing down my headcanon, which is all that it is, that Fire Festival ends in some sort of big, like, it doesn't work out for the protagonist.
Yeah.
In my mind, the way I kind of just assumed was that their only get out of jail free card for that would be a third party, such as the Marines coming at the tail end of it. Jinbei's not going to stop 2 Yonko crews, so, like, I'm saying, like, at the very tail end of it.
No,
so
I definitely see
maybe
that.
Not. Yeah, so not interfering in the Fire Festival itself, but kind of like playing a Shanks at the end of Marineford. Yeah.
No, I definitely see that. I do like that, and I do like that idea because I feel like the third act could give us like with the Fire Festival, it could give us some closure on the Wano internal political issues, and then we can scale that entire thing up.
Well, my thing about we disagree on the Fire Festival stuff, but in my mind,
I'm tired of arguing with you about it because it's just like we're just going to see it happen or not happen, and then I'll say I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But
my mind is like, there'll be a down point when the good guys are losing, and then we'll just get reinforcements, and it'll still be the Fire Festival will still be the final bit. But I think it's almost a lock that the Marines are turning up. We got the sword unit, we got Drake there, Kobe's on his way. We got, Kizaru showed interest. Garp maybe turning up to sort out the Rocks pirate situation. There are so many ins for the Marines. It's almost guaranteed at this point in my mind. Because if you look at Marineford, we got like one line of Shanks, and then he turns up in the war. So like, I think the Marines are turning up. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. I'm getting too many hints.
With Shanks.
Yeah.
Shanks, we were told that he was dealing with Kaido.
Yeah, we get one line about Shanks, and then he turns up at Marineford. Yeah. Like, come on. Like, I'm pretty sure
let's do one more, and then I really have to get something into my belly and start getting some work done. You can pick Morj. I'll allow you the honor of picking the last.
Thank you. Wait, did Christian get to pick?
Oh yeah, I picked
Yeah,
the last
You
question.
picked the last one.
That was the last question. And Ohara, you picked?
Nope, but you can still go.
Okay. All right. Shoot. Look. I'll answer from Silver. Oh no, that was the Silver.
Yeah, that was the Silver
All right.
That was
question.
question. It's like nice. I'm just doing this on purpose because like Morj looking for questions on Twitter is like always like some channel ASMR. It's like
If you guys make
I'm
questions
so distracted.
beforehand,
I'm not gonna be.
Yeah,
able
we
to do
always
it.
like that's like the single most frequent feedback we get. Select your questions before, but like we're like this is part of the charm of the podcast.
okay.
Like
how
aimlessly
about this?
wondering.
Yeah. How about? Oh, I forgot. Yeah, we're supposed to be picking these beforehand now, but we didn't do that. All right, whatever. Also we're sponsored by Audible. Forgot to say that. Since all people of D die with a smile, do you think Odin smiling? Yeah, basically he's asking, the Odin smile. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's clearly related to the clan of D and the ancient history. I think it's pretty obvious in my mind. Look at Roger. Look at Luffy when he was about to die. Yeah.
I'm not sure if Odin necessarily is a member of the D clan, but he's definitely like his family's tied back to the Void Century. So I feel like he definitely has strong like he is not Luffy and he's not Roger, but he definitely has the same vibe. So
Well, I guess like dying with a smile on your face is basically saying my will be carried on.
yeah, and I feel like
yeah.
in Odin's case, it might even go reach a bit further than that. Like he is happy with the life he lived, I feel, but at the same time, it also looks a bit knowing. Like he's literally like, I know
Well,
how things will turn out, kind of.
He does say my soul will live on, so he knows. He knows about secrets to One Piece
Yeah,
well. So maybe
exactly.
something there, I don't know.
Exactly. So yeah, I think it's just annoying smile, like he knows everything will be fine, kind of,
Yeah.
and he's done what he could. Yeah, nice. Then let's
Alright.
maybe wrap it up slowly. Yeah. Oh, I'm leaving that to you,
Yeah.
of course.
Or quickly, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Again, go ahead and check out the Red Force
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Thanks for joining.
On our show, we're gonna have the same thing in here. So stay tuned for next segments. All right, this show isn't over.
Oh
baby.
yeah. So
yeah.
segments after
this section
this.
of the Wano Report,
Yeah.
it'll be featured there, and they're gonna have like a whole additional couple of segments added onto
Sure.
it. So
Also,
Do you guys-
if
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
listening to this on the Red Force podcast, definitely make sure to subscribe to the Wano Report. We got to
Yeah,
steal all the
subscribe to the one.
subscribers.
Yeah, just you guys are already bigger
Christian
than us.
Christian
so.
will edit out this part.
Yeah, I'll just edit that.
Eric will definitely edit it out.
All right. So yeah,
Subscribe now.
subscribe to the Red Force podcast, and I've been saying this for months. I'm subscribed from Dritz, all right? No one should subscribe to Dritz. And subscribe to us instead. That's all I'm gonna say.
Unsubscribe from.
All right.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Nice. Anything else?
Yeah.
Thanks to Revujo, as always.
Yes, definitely. Thanks to Revujo.
Great artist.
And
All right.
I think that's it. Yeah, make
Great.
sure to leave us a like, support the podcast here. Maybe if you're listening to this on Spotify or anywhere else, we'd appreciate maybe a comment or a review or something.
Sure.
And if you made it to the end of this podcast again, like maybe tell us and leaving like a hashtag Wano Report in the comments.
Okay. There you
Again, out of curiosity.
go. Sure.
All
I
right.
think that's it.
I'm gonna hit stop.
Okay, let's do that.